On behalf of Great Oaks, welcome. And I just have to say, if you can't get a really good introduction from your brother-in-law, you're in big trouble. So you guys be the real judge of this at the end of the day. So why the stack of money? Who here has an unlimited budget? Raise your hand. Unlimited budget. More money than you. Okay, so I've been waiting for this my whole career. So you and I, we're going off to the bar. The rest of these schmucks we're going to leave behind. I've been waiting for this moment. I've asked this question for 30 years. And whether it's Kimberly Clark, if I go through the list of clients that I've worked with, and whether it's Kimberly Clark, no way. Even though they had a very, very large budget, it wasn't enough. Coors, Culligan, Orkin, Mercury Marine. The list goes on and on and on. When you get to, if you take a look at companies like Network Insights, Dan Neely doesn't. Ready Crisp Bacon, phenomenal product that it's microwavable bacon. Grew the company, Tom Bush, very, very, very large company, and sold to an even larger one, ConAgra. Before he started the business and after he sold it, both times he didn't have enough money. Nobody has enough budget. And that's really the whole point and really what I'm going to talk about today. There's two reasons for this conversation. You don't have enough money, you don't have an unlimited budget, and even if you told me you did, the gentleman back there, I'm going to say you don't have enough time. You don't have enough time, you don't have enough budget. So it really comes down to what you can affect. You can develop a differentiated business model. As founders, that's what you're responsible for, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So the 8 questions that founders really need to get right. I'm going to pick on Michael right away because we had a really good conversation to begin with. So what's your definition of marketing? And no right or wrong, so just fire away.
Helping define what you do to the people you need to know.
All right, that's very, very good. Other definitions of marketing, anybody? Joe Coyne, I'm going to pick on a Harvard MBA back there. What's your definition of marketing?
How you present your company to the marketplace and communicate your value proposition.
Okay. So I look at it, a lot of those pieces, but I go really to the top of the food chain. I say that marketing is way too important to be the purview of the marketing department. It really needs to be a cross-functional discipline. And you need to take a look and say, how do I define the target market? So you're right, who is my target market? Who do I really need to be something to, important to? How do you find the target market? How do you determine their needs and wants? And how do you satisfy those needs and wants different than the competition? So the first takeaway today, you can't be all things to all people. That takes an unlimited budget. You can't do it. Be something important for someone. And note that this doesn't say give them what we can make. It does not say give them what we can make. It says understand the needs and wants, then work really hard to satisfy those better than the competition. This is the business that I'm in. And I believe it's the business that all of you need to be in as founders. Because if it doesn't start at the top, I'm going to tell you it doesn't get done. You can't abdicate that. So determining the target market, determining their needs and wants, satisfying those better than the competition. I'm going to start with a story. It's sort of near and dear to my heart. It's a good example because I'm going to start with a low tech, and a lot of you involved in high tech. But we're going to go old school, so bear with me. But I think it's very, very relevant to exactly what you're doing. It's a true story I was involved with and know the situation very well. It's a little ski hill on the west side of Madison that didn't have unlimited funds. But it had very few resources, but was run mostly by a group of very, very passionate and dedicated people that got paid very little for what they did. Now, does that sound familiar to some of you? So you should be able to identify with this. There's a small ski hill named Blackhawk just outside of Madison, Wisconsin, with 3 rope tows, 5 runs of varying difficulty. It has a little warming hut at the top of the hill with a big fireplace and some rustic tables and benches. The hill was experiencing financial difficulties. It was losing money and not able to retain members. The board was frustrated because families would join the club on an annual membership basis but then leave as soon as their kids became teenagers and wanted more challenging runs, chairlifts, large half pipes for snowboarders, and more varied terrain for skiers. The board became convinced that they needed to go through a costly update, one that they couldn't afford, and one they weren't sure when done would differentiate itself from the other established ski hills in the area, and everyone agreed could put the club in financial peril. So positioning is ultimately the art of sacrifice. Blackhawk's problem was not that they didn't offer a compelling product or service. It was in how they were positioning their product. Blackhawk, like many companies who make the same mistake, was trying to be all things to all people and in turn being just a little something to everyone. And a little something isn't enough to sustain a competitive advantage. Positioning is the art of sacrifice. Blackhawk Ski Hill hadn't thought through the 3 key questions in my mind that every business needs to know. We're going to talk about 8, but there's these 3 real core. In order to really create a competitive advantage and customer loyalty and really connect with the target market, to ultimately create fanatics. That's what you want to do. Fanatics who love your brand and tell others about it. So those 3 questions are, who are you really for? What specific group of people will really love your brand? You can actually picture a person that represents that group of people in your minds with each of your businesses. What is it that you do? What benefit do you deliver? Careful, it's often very different than your product. And 3, really, how are you different? What's your value promise to your customers? Through a series of workshop sessions with the board and the Ski Hills members, Blackhawk Ski Hill came to realize that their core target was really families with small kids learning how to ski. The Blackhawk Ski brand repositioned itself as a fun place where kids learn to ski and started to really get serious about targeting families with very young kids. They forgot about adding chairlifts and trying to make the ski hill compete with the larger resorts in central and northern Wisconsin. Instead, they developed a host of products that targeted families and kids. Things like First Flight Ski Program that taught kids to ski, family nights, a kids ski rental program. They built a safe area to inner tube for very small children. The list went on and on and on. Today, there's a waiting list of over 300 families. The parking lot has been expanded twice, and yet you can still barely find a place to park on a winter's night or day. So this is, I think, a very, very good example of a small little business that asks those fundamental questions that I work with very, very big businesses, and I work with startups. Who are you for? Families with young children. What do? They teach kids to ski. How are they different? Provide low-tech fun and family interaction without the huge expenditure of time and money. You can go there for 2 hours and zip home and still see the Packer game. I'm sure all of you are very, very interested in that. So the 3 questions that we're going to start with. What do you do? Who are you for? And how are you different? Okay, another quick question. What does Revlon do? What business are they in? What business is Revlon in? Anybody? Mateen?
Cosmetics.
Cosmetics. That's what most people would say. Okay. Charles Revson, the founder of Revlon, was quoted as saying, in our factories, we produce cosmetics. But in our stores, we sell hope. Business that they're in is ultimately selling hope. And I'd like you to each think about in your minds, what business are you in? Now, here's the catch that I tell companies. You can't whip out that 1-paragraph mission statement that undoubtedly talks about delighting customers, delivering world-class solutions, satisfying stakeholders. Can't do it. To take the test, you have to answer in 1 word. You can cheat and do a hyphenated word if you want. But that's really the core. What is it that you really, really do? And don't answer in terms of a product. Products are critical. I'm going to talk about that. They're absolutely critical. But that's not what you do. This came from working with John at the University of Wisconsin with the group of students through a connection that they have. So statement really came from a potential Great Oaks portfolio company. They had a fantastic idea of replacing the wedding booth. You know when you go to weddings and there's that picture booth at weddings, and you can have louder? Can everybody hear? Okay. So when you go to weddings, there's that photo booth, and you go in and you take photos, and then you write something on it. There's the 3 of them, and you sort of figure, what do I do for the first one? And by the time the 3rd one comes around, you have no idea what to do, so it's sort of a straight shot. This concept is about replacing the ad hoc individuals that take photographs and then send them to you, and even replacing the paid photographer. It's a fantastic idea that results in a stream of stories, words, and photos that would ultimately be created by those attending the wedding. So are they a software company, or really are they in the business of making shared memories for social gatherings? That's a really, really big idea. And I would contend that that's what they have to manage. AAA, we're going to go to an established business. Worked with them many different times during my career, as recently and just finished up another large project. AAA had a problem. They weren't retaining members 1 to 5 years when they signed up. Now, why would that be? Well, it just so happened that 28 of the 32 car manufacturers have emergency road service. Emergency road service was the key driver of why somebody signed up. So if it's no longer really viable, once it gets to 5 years, and let's face it, how many people have their cars break down, within a 5-year period? It's not that many on the road, and it was less and less than it was 20 years ago. You wouldn't sign up again for AAA because it wasn't valuable to you. It didn't provide any reason. And the other thing is, when you first join, you get a membership packet that's this thick. And you know what? They were selling life insurance, car insurance, sunglasses, or where's the sunglasses? There we go, sunglasses, cruises, triptychs. The list went on and on. Very, very confusing to understand what business are they in. The members told us. They did a lot. The members knew you're a member travel organization. And by the way, they could really defend that. It was a capability or core competency that they could defend because they had brick and mortar. They had all these really myriad of products that, when put together, provided a phenomenal platform that gets people going and keeps them going. So did they talk about, or did they stop selling life insurance? No, because those products were going to bring dollars over the transom. But what they talked about to their members was a member travel organization, so those members could understand exactly the value that they gave. And down the road, they could sell those different products, but they stopped talking about this much and started talking about this much that was understandable. Anybody familiar with American Girl? Okay. What business are they in? Scott, American Girl.
Making girls happy.
Yeah, well, that's it, making girls happy, and parents usually say selling expensive, really expensive dolls. Pleasant Frauchi was very, 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 very smart woman. From the very beginning, she said, we are in the education business and empowering young women. That's the business we're in. So that led them to dolls, you bet, but it also led them to publishing and content and books. And when they introduced the dolls in Williamsburg, there's an event at Williamsburg. That's the business that they were in. There are a lot of doll companies out there. There's a lot of doll companies, but they were very, very unique because of their core competency or their capability of educating and empowering young women. Now, how about Honda? What business is Honda in? By now, you should be getting sort of good at this. What business is Honda in? Just don't tell me cars. What business is Honda in? What else does Honda sell? Motorcycles. They're in the business of combustion motors. It's Honda Motor Company. Pretty much 6-cylinder on down. They're number 1 in motorcycles. They're number 5 to 6 back and forth in cars. They have snowblowers. They have lawnmowers. That's the business that they manage. That's what they manage. Now, how are they different? What they do leads to that whole idea of simple. It doesn't break. It comes right out of what they do. That's their value promise. That's the thing that consumers see. But the business that they manage, not any good? Not any but the business that they manage is motors. And last but not least, I'd like to say, what's Chrysler? Now, Liz and I bought a Chrysler minivan back when they were really big, loved it. Haven't bought a Chrysler since. If you had to say 10 years from now, 20 years from now, which company's going to be around? I'm putting my money on Honda because they have a core competency. They know what to manage for success. I think Chrysler depends on having a great looking car, but unless their core, and I don't know this, but unless their core competency is design, and they're really great at it, and year after year after year they have the best designed cars, and I'm putting my money on Honda. I think they know what it is that they do. And last but not least, a shout out to my pals at Eat Street. So we've got Kara and Eric and Matt here today. That's a complex business. They're an aggregator of restaurants for takeout. In Madison, they have 150 restaurants at the tip of your finger that you can order from, but they're also in 17 different markets. But what is it that they really, really do? And we talked about this, and we need to get the customers off the coupon drug. And the question is that really what they need to do? The foundation, the real key, the whole thing to their business model right now lies with the restaurants and getting them and keeping them and satisfying them. Eat Street builds restaurant traffic and increases their margin dollars vis-a-vis volume. They build business for restaurants. That's their currency. Eat Street's currency to the restaurants is customers. But down the road, if they really take a look at this capability, they're going to say, we're in the business of building business for restaurants, so they'll use the information they get from their site to help the restaurants create promotions to build traffic surgically in downtimes against heavy users, expanding the customer base against light users, and in return, the restaurant's currency will be the coupons to support the efforts of Eat Street at even greater rates than they do today. And there's all sorts of options of going beyond their existing business model to other things that help build business and service for restaurants. So the customer's loyalty or currency is really loyalty. So no, the strategy is not getting off the coupon drug. It's to transfer who pays for the coupons. And this is a very different strategy stemming from understanding what it is that you really do. So how do you get there? This is one of these things that you can work with companies for 2 months to get there. Some companies don't have a core competency and have to reverse engineer really based on just a couple of things. But I always look at 3 things. I look at a unique capability that's made up of a number of underlying strengths. And these strengths can't be, sort of slogans. We have people that really want to do a great job, and you hear that all the time. They have to be tangible strengths. And what happens is if you do this and you go through a session like that, you end up saying, here's 2 over here that make sense and lead to this capability. Here's another 1 over here. Here's another 2. If we put them together, we're able to do this. Think about Pleasant Fauci and American Girl and how they did that. Think about AAA with brick and mortar and all those different pieces that they could put together. And here's a weakness over here that if we change this weakness among a myriad of different weaknesses, but if we change this one to a strength, it would add to that core competency. It has to provide an access to a target market by making a significant contribution to the perceived customer benefit or value. And here's the tough one. The core competency and the resulting customer benefits have to be difficult to imitate. So that's how you go about taking a look at it. So I really like to think of the core competency as the trunk of the tree. Okay, it's the trunk of the tree. The branches, and those are the products. That's what the consumer sees. They see the products. But you're managing that trunk. And if you have a stable trunk, you're going to develop different products and services that really add to your competency and add to the perceived benefit of that customer. So you manage your core competency, and that's something that each one of you as founders, I believe it's the most important job that you can do. You design your internal organization around the functions and activities most critical to the success of the firm's core competency. You add to your core competency over time by improving the strengths that make up your capability, adding critical new ones, and isolating weaknesses that, when converted, add to your core competency. And you use your core competency as a barometer for what's important and what isn't. You do a start doing list and a stop doing, because let's face it, I was just talking to somebody today that John and I are having a conversation, and he was comparing sort of brick and mortar, multi-channel retail to e-commerce, and the ability for the inability for the brick and mortar and multi-channel, or as now the term is omni-channel, how slow it is for them to, and Scott can understand this being in the business that, the whole shoe business, and once you get to a certain size, every business has things that they get to a point saying, if we understand what we do, this is what we need to stop doing, and this is what we need to start doing. The start doings add to the core competency, the stop doings don't. So your business scope ultimately leads to an understanding that core competency and your capability. And by the way, a lot of people say, well, our firm has three core competencies. I really don't believe that. I believe you can't manage 3 core competencies. You can manage 1 because there's so many things that come off it. But it leads to understanding target markets, segments, products, pricing, channels, and your competitive set. And one other word on this, because I so believe in the strength of products, and I don't want you to think that I'm saying product is not important, because it's the outgrowth of that competency. But today, if you think about really high-performing companies, a company typically falls in one of 2 categories. They're either product, pure product, or pure service. And a product is something you can take home, put in your hand. Service is intangible. But the really great companies push them together. And if you're a product company, you add services. And if you're a service company, you add products. So how does that work? The accounting firm. Worked with a really great regional accounting firm that said, you know, we're really not just about tax. We're about, and not about just saving a little tax money. We're about pushing the bottom line. So they had really a complex and really broad management advisory services. They developed software for their clients to help in the accounting function, but also to help pick the best people in HR, et cetera, et cetera. So they added a product to an intangible. And the best example I can think of in terms of product adding service, well, by the way, the Networked Insights is a good example. I mean, some of the research we did with them is adding a small consultancy because it was very difficult to understand their product and very difficult to use. And we went to one of the targets was ad agencies. They just said, we just don't have time to learn it. Love it, love the idea of it, don't have time to learn it. But Apple would be the one that I would pick. People say that, you know, you have a MacBook Pro, I can buy a PC, it's you know, it's a little less expensive. I say I would, you know, $1,800, $1,600, I'd spend $5,000, I'd spend $6,000, I'd spend $8,000. Don't tell Apple that, but I'd spend $8,000 for this because of the service that they added, which was the Genius Desk, because it's my IT department. And I value that service, and to me, pushing that service into product was brilliant. So once you answer what you do, you move to the critical question of, who is it that you're really for? Be for everybody. But if you're not something to someone, you're nothing to everyone. And again, you ask yourself this, who, in terms of my customers, or if you're at the point where you don't have customers yet, who I'm thinking about targeting that's going to provide and be able to monetize what I'm doing. Get a picture of somebody who, if that person left, just stopped coming, disappeared, would you really lose sleep over? That's the key to me. Who would you lose sleep over? So lots of times when we talk about defining target markets, we start with demographics, and that's a fantastic place to start. So if you're on the consumer side, you say, I'm going after college students, 18 to 24. Great, I understand who that is. But a lot of you are not that far removed from college. Are all college students the same? Can you put them all in one boat and say, we're going to market to college students? Very few products that can do that. If you're a B2B, you're talking SIC codes, you're talking NAICS, so we're going to go after the financial industry. We're going to go after advertising agencies. But again, businesses don't buy products, people do. And the really great companies, company after company after company, has an attitudinal target market that is very, very strong, and they know really, really well. Anybody follow basketball, pro basketball at all? Yeah, okay, well, I know Rob does, so I'm going to go right back here. Celtics, describe the Celtics to me versus LA Lakers.
Celtics old, kind of that East Coast old school sensibility. LA Lakers are newer, flashier.
Yep.
More celebrities on the court side.
Yep, yeah, it's showtime. You know, Celtics, you get down to the last 2 minutes, they're not going to let you to the basket. It's that blue-collar toughness. They each have a real sort of attitudinal description that talks about their fans and certainly their team. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Famous Footwear, and I'm not going to go on and on because we'd be here for days, and there's a lot of great stuff to get to. But Famous was real interesting. When I got there, they said, it's all about soccer, Mom, Scott. And I thought, wow. You know, I know soccer. We got a lot of boys. We got 4 boys, and all of them play soccer. And that's strange because I go to a soccer game. I don't think really all the women are the same. But you know, we had to get rolling for the vendor meetings, so we sort of started there. But we spent the next 6 months really, really doing ethnographies, going into women's homes, going up to their bedrooms, looking at their shoes, going on shopping trips with them. And guess what? You know, there were 2 big segments. Big difference. You walk into their house, the artwork was like night and day. The fashion value customer, the house lit up. There was really interesting artwork. It was decorated with a sense of flair and fashion, not so of the core value. The core value woman would say, I'd rather have last year's shoe at a great price. The fashion value woman would say, I want today's shoe at a good value. The fashion value woman got excited when she talked about it. When we filmed the ethnographies, you could just hear it in her voice. She loved shoes. She said, shoes make the outfit. You know, my dress size may change, but my shoes never disappoint. They stay the same size. You know, life's short, buy the shoes first. On and on. It makes the outfit. So she was very, very interested in fashion and really thought of herself in sort of that pre-mom self. Very, very different in terms of the shoes they bought and how they bought them and what excited her. We changed the stores, we changed the merchandise, we changed all the communication. In fact, we changed the stores twice to go after that fashion value mom and not have a revolution like Penny's did, but to evolve from a core value Target to a fashion value. We felt we wouldn't lose that core value, but we needed to evolve, and that was all attitudinal. And by the way, for the first year at Famous Footwear, we made this fashion value mom was known as Lydia, and we made just really these placards, like political placards. And anytime we had a group over about 8 people, they were handed out when you came in. And on one side was Lydia, and the other side was Al Bundy, the old shoe dog. And when somebody said an Al Bundy type of statement, an old Famous Footwear statement, everybody would hold up Al Bundy. And when they said a Lydia, they'd hold up Lydia. So we started the hard work of also transforming the company around who it was we were really for. I'm going to give you a quick test. You don't have a piece of paper in front of you. I'm just going to ask you to be honest. This is going to go real fast. So, piece of paper and pen or your mind, which will work. I'm going to give you 5 seconds, and I'm going to count as soon as I ask you the question. Think of or write down a favorite flower. Name a favorite flower. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. How many thought rose? Wow, it's a different group. Daisy. Tiger lily. Okay. How many other tiger lilies?
Hydrangea.
Hydrangea. How many other hydrangeas? One other. What else? Lupins. How many other lupins? Orchid. Now, I think this is very indicative of this group. And actually, I probably should have thought about this, and I should have prepared for this. Typically, when I say roses, and I'll say, well, the roses stand up, it's, a good half the room. Daisies fill out about another quarter, and then you get a few things like lupins. And then you say, well, the roses stand up, and, they just pile on up. And then you say, well, the lupins. And then you ask yourself that question, who would you rather go after? It's a big strategic question, and there's no right or wrong. Every category has a heavy user. A third of the customers, potential customers, consumers will purchase 2/3 or more. You can go after that heavy user and get a bigger share, or fight for share, or you can go after the niche. But if you're going after the lupins and there's 2 of them and there's 3 companies, one's going to have problems. But again, there's not a right or wrong, but it's something that you have to think of in terms of target. I love the Lessons of Animal Farm. I think it's a great marketing book. And really the thing that came out of it is all are equal, but some are much more equal than others. And that's certainly true when it comes to target market. So know who's important to you. But it's easier said if you're an established company. What if you're a startup? And you say, I really don't know exactly who my target market is. So here's the way that we approach it with Networked Insights. They were at a point where they're saying, we got a great product. We know it does a lot of things, but we're not successful coming into somebody and saying, Ben, I got a product, and you know what? It does these 10 things. It's very difficult for somebody, I can tell you, being on my side, when I left the agency world and went to the dark side and the client, I really had no time for somebody that was fishing and couldn't really provide me with something that was, one, something that I was interested in, but did it very, very differently, or 2, combine things together and allowed me to do it smarter and faster. So this is Networked Insights. We looked at really killer applications or use cases. We did 10 of them. I'm showing 5 here. I'm showing 4 here. But they went on. Tracking campaigns. Let me just take you through this. Traditional advertising agencies and research firms as a way to track campaigns. Now, that was the demographic. We did a lot on the attitudinal in terms of their hopes, their fears, why they bought, their needs and wants. We called it Campaign Evaluator. and it was tracking target segments across awareness, attitude, behaviors with insights to evolve campaigns. Agencies do it all the time. The difference here is that they were doing it in the social space.
Give us a quick description of what network insights.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, thanks, John. I always assume that everybody does. Network insights gleams, like their name says, insights from social spaces, from the social media where people are. So it's not a mirrored wall and you're sitting on the other side of the mirror and you're watching a focus group. It's not a telephone survey. It's not a panel. It's information that comes from the chatter out there. I like to say that they're an alchemist. They really turn sand into gold. They take the chatter and make sense of it. And make sense of it across, again, 10 different really, really strong use cases that we developed, each with a very different target. The one at the bottom here, which was ranked 8th, ended up being really the real sort of use case and an app and killer app that they've built the company around. And that was measuring advertising content's long tail. Advertising and media agencies, in-house media departments, called it an engagement quantifier. And it really compares the traditional CPN or cost per thousand or the cost per TRP, which is a rating point at how you buy media, versus an ad or TV show talks value, its talk value. So they created really a new way of valuing ad and TV shows. So if you've got Grey's Anatomy and Private Practice, they both play in the same space. And let's say they had the same cost per thousand or rating point, or basically the same. But one was talked about a lot more, received a lot more chatter. The people were emotionally far more involved in it. That's of real value to an advertiser. And all things being equal, that's going to significantly break the ties. They're doing that, so they started with RIM and a whole lot of other companies. Here's something that just came out, an email blast. Outsmart the upfronts, the real-time advantage. During this year's upfront presentation, Network Insights took a stand for the brands against this antiquated institution. We ambushed the events with street teams and a mobile data center showcasing the power of real-time insights in the form of buy and don't buy, recommendations for newly announced TV shows based on social data. The point wasn't to use recommendations to buy fall TV now. The point was that we were making. The point was that making gut decisions months in advance in a data-rich, real-time world is an unnecessary marketing gamble. So they continue to this day, really saying we've carved out now who we're for. We did it by really testing and finding out where we stick against an application. Will they expand to those other things? You bet. But not just yet. And actually, I was going to go back. So what they do is a better way to buy media and spend your media dollars. But a quick look at the next question, how Networked Insights is different. Is there a better way to discover insights in an unfiltered, natural setting of the social media environment? Smart company, smart leader, and they'll be around for a long, long time. So the last one, how are you different before we get to the other 5? Brand positioning. This is your value promise. It flows from knowing your core competency and ultimately knowing that target market and who you're for. So I like to say brand positioning is the art of sacrifice. You can't be all things to all people. Hey, Sears tried it, right? So we'll sell insurance, we'll sell brokerage products. Next to the Craftsman tools, we'll do a little bit of fashion. How's that working for Sears? I do a lot of work with McMillan Doolittle. It's a retail consulting firm in Chicago. They have this black hole where companies go and they track retailers, and they'll be there. I mean, they're convinced. So if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. Brand positioning is creating a relationship with your target so you can win the ties. I love that statement. So you can win the ties. It doesn't have to do with price. I've been involved with, actually it never is. I've been involved with hundreds of research projects, and I can tell you that price has never, ever once come up as the single driver of a purchase decision. Nobody wakes up and says, I'm going to go out and buy the cheapest car I can find today. Let's see, I need a lawyer. I'm going to find the cheapest lawyer I can find. I'm going to have a beer, a little bit of wine. I'm going to go buy the cheapest wine that I can get a hold of. It just doesn't happen. They buy value, which is a relationship between two things, but they don't buy on price. So brands are not what you buy, but what you buy into. And these are 3 brands that I buy into personally. I've talked about Apple. I have a great affection for Breckenridge, and actually Colorado used to take the boys out to John's place out west, but we go out to Breckenridge, so I think, even though we don't get out there enough, I think of sort of family times out there. And some would accuse me of being willing to spend more money on a bicycle than I will on a car. It's not quite that way, but I'm very, very much into my bicycles. And Seven Cycles is a handmade frame company in New Hampshire, and I'm into them. So a brand is a collection of perceptions in the mind of the consumer that directly affects purchasing behavior and recommendations. So what's the value of a brand? Well, for Coca-Cola, it's $65 billion, 45% of capitalization. If Coke's assets just went away, just disappeared today, you still could borrow over $60 billion in cash. They could, not you, because of the value of the Coke branded trademark. Branding is what people tell themselves or their friends and themselves afterwards. Has anybody ever heard about the fact that United breaks guitars? Yeah.
They wrote that song about it, and there was this whole big thing blowing there.
Yeah. So sometimes what people say just isn't so good. I think interesting about the fact that sometimes what people say is not so good. You can't stop them about saying, really that value promise and what your brand's about. If we went to our neighbors and said, the Coopers, what's the value promise? What's the brand positioning of the Coopers? They'd very, very quickly come up with probably 4 boys, competitive, and then they'd probably say, got a great mom. That loves events herself, and actually would take them to Robin Yount's 3,000th hit when they were, really little, just so they could have the experience. But they're going to say something about each and every one of you. It happens. So describe the French for me. Describe the French. Just throw it.
With disdain for everyone who's not them.
Okay. Good. Anything else? That probably says it all. Describe the Irish. What was that?
I didn't say anything. I heard someone say drugs. That wasn't me.
Okay, good time. Good time. Good spirited. Let's go to good spirited. Yeah. Who was the first person to fly across the Atlantic? Lindbergh. Who was the second? What's the highest mountain? Okay, second? K2, right. Few people know that. Third, probably don't. First person to walk on the moon? Armstrong. Second, Rob's on a roll. Andy was the second. Just had an anniversary, so we might say old Buzz. Who was your first kiss? Don't just shout the name out there. Just think to yourself. And then when I ask who was the second, I don't want to hear somebody going through second, third, or fourth. But most people remember the first kiss. When it gets to the second or the third, they have a really hard time. Who was first in copiers?
Zero.
Haven't been for about 15 years. Canon. So that's the whole point of this, that beware that your custom lines look like this. They have one slot for each thing that they choose to keep. And we talked, again, going back just the conversation we had today. You're trying to get into a company. They just can't deal with the fact that you can solve their problems. They can deal with the fact that you can solve one differently in a new space. They can deal with the fact that you can combine a bunch of things and make their life easier. They have to understand what it is you do and how you're different. So I look at 5 different things. I look at a foundation story, and a lot of you have a very short foundation story, but you started the product or your company for a reason. And then I like to look at worldview. And if I said, and worldviews tend to be very, very polarizing, they sync up with that customer's mindset and opinions about themselves and others and society. But they tend to be very polarizing. If I said, raise your hand if you think hunting promotes family values. Raise your hand. All right, Ben, you're being intimidated because nobody else is raising their hand. Now, I'm going to jump on your side. So, Ben, why does hunting promote family values?
You get to do it together.
I hunt grouse once a year. You're with your kids. You take them outside. You show them what a white pine is versus a balsam versus a spruce. You teach them that hey, if you shoot everything up, you're not going to have anything there next year, and it's a family time. Why does hunting not promote family values? I know the other really well too, and can argue that as well. Just show it, Mateen. Why does hunting not promote family values?
They should.
Scott. Violence, yeah. Why do you have to kill something to teach your kids about family values? All right, so that's a really good example of worldviews. They tend to be very polarizing. But you know what? Cabela's doesn't care about the people that don't think it does. They're not going to get them as customers. So worldview starts to tell exactly how a company is different because it goes back to their fundamental beliefs. How many people are big Walmart fans? A couple. I didn't used to be. I don't shop there. But I'm going to tell you that I've sat through focus groups where women are crying and say, I couldn't have had Christmas without Walmart. Very, very, very powerful. There's 50 million people that are unbanked. Walmart has a banking service for those people. So that group of people, they know who they're for. They are very, very important. And I can tell you that their worldview, coming from Sam Walton, and I'm not defending them, I'm just saying it's an interesting company when you go to what they're really about. They will say, we deserve, every single person deserves a decent standard of living. That's up there. They talk about it all the time. Now, Target plays in the same space. I've never worked for Target. One of our son's wife is a buyer for them and does the collaborations with designers, so the Massimo stuff, et cetera, et cetera. I believe that Target's is probably something like, hey, great fashion shouldn't just be for rich people. Because that's what they, that's their belief. That's why they've done what they do and sort of, ultimately have the product they do. They play in the same space. Those worldviews are very, very different. They drive different companies. And think about your worldview. As founders, you should think about your foundation story and what your worldview is. Let's go to brand promise. Who else do I go to here? Let's go sunglasses. So only, and again, the name of your company was? Okay. Only your company delivers what? What do you deliver?
I think we deliver sexy.
Okay. All right, cool. It's also sort of that sort of first purchase, second one's half price from that point on, so you're part of a club. You can also talk about to a specific target, brand, or company is a industry category description that offers what you do and provides how you're different because of some ultimately reason to believe. We move to brand essence. I like to take a look at 3 to 5 words of what you are and what you aren't. This helps to define really the parameter that you're playing in. So for Famous Footwear, it was about more female, more fun, more fashion, more friends. Not that she was shopping with friends, but it was the attitude of that sort of pre-mom self, more fantasy. Now, one of the things you can do is do opposites of those. But I think one of the things to take a look at is the downside of what you are. So when we said more female, we weren't really turning into a female boutique. It was not that. It was more of a female orientation towards that fashion value customer. But we knew that had to be a great place for her teenage boys because we sold a lot of athletic. 48% of the sales were athletic, really driven by her. And then you got brand character, a personification of a brand. And lots of times you can look to archetypes for that. There's archetypes and stories that have been told throughout history. So there's the rebel, there's the magician, there's the hero. the wizard. And again, we talked about networked insights really being the alchemist and turning this chatter out there, this myriad of chatter, really which is like sand, into gold. And that's so that brand character really, again, starts defining who you are. And then finally, your brand vision. And to me, that's the most fun, because you really start working with companies around headlines that would happen 10 years down the road. What would the headline for your company be 10 years down the road? What would people be saying about it? People would describe you as what? If you went away, what would people miss? What are the possibilities for your brand? What have you started doing? What have you stopped doing? How will the customer's expectations be changed? How will the products change? How will the services change? All those things are really the brand vision of what you're becoming based on those three questions. And remember that words matter. Would you rather make money or be rich? Who would rather make money? Okay, who would rather be rich? Who isn't thinking at all right now? I mean, you have to be one or the other. I'm asking it's either or. Who would rather, you have to vote for one way or the other so I can see how this goes. Who would want to make money? Okay, who would rather be rich? Okay. Powerful, powerful set of words. If you're a target market and you're a nervous administrator assistant seeking foolproof office furniture recommendations, would you rather have the safe choice or is the expert's recommendation? Hey, I chose the expert's recommendation. Don't blame me if it collapses. Big, big difference between those. Our agency did Full Throttle with Coca-Cola. It's an energy drink. Premier energy drink or refuels your energy? Makes shaving easy or lets you autopilot through shaving? Are the caring experts surrounds you with caring? Prudent investment advisors or helps you make the right decision? Would you rather be safe or bulletproof? I would much rather be bulletproof. So words really matter when you're putting together this value promise or your positioning and how you're really different. So let's put these three pieces together and then briefly cover the other five. What does Apple do? I talked about this from day one. If you've ever read the book, you'd know for sure that it's a conscious decision to integrate innovative design and technology. That's ultimately what Apple did. Hardware with MacBook Pro, programs, graphical interfaces, Keynote, iPhoto, iMovie, iTunes, Safari, electronic devices that connects to those things, iPod, and runs online service that connects iTunes, Music Store. Then there's the whole retail experience. And just that retail experience by itself is a really great example of integrating design and technology. And I love the fact that I can check out of an Apple store with my app, and I don't have to even talk to a salesperson unless I'm buying something really big. So they integrate, and there's a double entendre there. The products integrate design and technology, and so does the company integrating things together. So who is Apple for? All right, so small business, entrepreneurs, individuals, that's a demographic description. But there's an attitudinal description, I think, that's even more powerful, something that I would bet the Apple users here can identify with. This is a good example of something worked on early in my career. Northwest Fabrics. How many of you sew? All right. That it tells you something if you're Northwest Fabrics, right? There were two segments. One sewed out of need, one sewed out of creativity. Which target do you think was growing? Creativity, right? It's projects. That was growing like crazy. The other one was actually shrinking. So now you're Northwest Fabrics. You're selling fabrics and yarn and thread. And your target market is really going towards creativity. So we said, who are they for? Sewers who sew for creativity, not out of necessity. That's where we were going to evolve to. We knew the ones out of necessity would still come. We're still going to carry thread. We're still going to carry yarn. We're still going to carry all that a store like this would. What do they do, though? What do they do? They're about ideas. They're about creativity. And how are they different? They're the store that actually helps you become creative, the store that's set up with ideas, stations, because most people, the insight there is most people want to be creative, but they don't think they can. My wife does a lot of stamping. She's really, really good at coming up with concepts. She works with a whole number of different women who love doing it, but don't feel they can come up with the creativity. If I ask this group, how many of you feel you're creative? Probably most of you raise your hands. If I ask that of most groups, there'll be 1 or 2 people at best that will raise their hands. So we're helping them become creative, growing not only the target market, but playing where that target market was going. The more ideas, so as Northwest Fabrics, the more ideas store. Here's another example, Firestone. Firestone, this was a couple years ago, worked on this, and they said, boy, we really want to go upstream. We want to be, it's a complete auto care center. We want to go to people that buy new cars. Well, that's interesting. But where do you go when you buy a new car? How many people have bought a new car here? I'm going to look at some of these guys within the last 5 years. Where do you go? You go to the dealership? You go back to the dealership. You don't go to Midas when all of a sudden you need a muffler. You're going to go to the dealership. But after 5 years, you start parceling it out. Midas, you go over here for Jiffy Lube. So, and the insight there was the average age today of cars on the road are 9 years. But now let's get into who has a used car here over 5 years. Okay, how many miles? 140. How many miles? 150. Who else? Who else? Who has a car that's over 5 years old? Okay. 90. When you ask questions, oftentimes I'll get 144,000. They know exactly how many miles they have. And it becomes a badge. You know, I've got it to 144, you're going to get it to 160. So that was the insight that drove this. So who for? Used car owners, 5+ years. What do? They're really a dealership for used cars. That's what Firestone Complete Auto Care is. It's a dealership for used cars. They don't exist. So create a dealership for used cars. And how are they different? It gets your car the extra mile. Where that value promise to them is, we're going to get your car an extra mile. This was the brand essence video. It wasn't the advertising that people saw out, although there's bits and pieces of this. It was to tell the people within Firestone that our value promise is we're a used car dealership, and our value promise is to get them the extra mile. I think a really powerful piece on a single value promise. So how about these 8 questions? I always start with insights. What do we really need to know? You can go forever and have analysis paralysis, but I was working with the interns today, there are key things that you ultimately really need to know that will drive the business, and you need to find those. What is it that you do, who you're for, how you're different, what needs to be done, those objectives. I'm going to talk about 4 really behaviors that every business manages. What's the plan of action, and what's your message strategy? So insights. One of the things that I always take a look at is you got different target market segments. How big is that target in terms of its universe? How penetrated is the client I'm working with? What's the potential for growth? But we define that target market. And again, it's demographics and attitudinal. And the next thing I ask then is, well, how many people are aware? Unaided awareness. So when you say, name me a beer, unaided awareness would be Coors Beer, Miller, Spotted Cow. The first one I say is probably very, very directionally indicative of market share or my purchasing habits. So I want to know awareness. I want to know if they really understand the organization. It's knowledge. That's the next step down. That would be the AAA example. And this keeps on working down, because 100% aren't going to be aware, and 100% aren't going to have knowledge, and 100% of those that are knowledgeable are not going to have positive attitudes towards your company. And we want to know both those that are positive and those that are negative, and why. What are the purchasing barriers? We talked about Net Promoter Score, or their willingness to promote you. And then there's trial. I use the product, and retrial. Looking at those things allows you to say, where do I really need to go? If there's big awareness and really pretty good attitudes, decent trial, terrible retrial, you probably have a product problem, you have a customer service problem. If it's real low awareness, but then there's a pretty good percent that have positive attitudes, trial and retrial, you've got an awareness, and we can say Okay, if you're gonna acquire new people, you really need to fix that. So it surgically allows you to look at your business and say, where do I need to go? What's really gonna drive this business? Eat Street. I'm gonna go back again to Eat Street. I had that conversation just the other day, about $1 billion company. It's a great goal. Matt says we're going to gain customers via white label at no cost, but when we really started analyzing, and that's true, it's definitely it's a holy grail out there. When we really started analyzing the metrics in a disciplined manner, we also recognized a chink in the armor or retention. So they were getting a lot of customers, but in terms of the ability to retain them. And I would argue a very fast way to $1 billion company is to go from a small retention rate to a much higher. So that forces you to look at some very, very different things. We're working on both of those, but that there's a real focus against both of those, and we know ultimately what's the engine driving the business at this point. So what do we push on? And again, it all goes back to you have a limited time and limited dollars, so be focused. What needs to be done? It's real interesting as John has hooked me up with a number of different companies just to spend a little time and talk with them. It's an enjoyable thing to do. I would say I can't do too much of it because I have this ongoing business, but it's really, really fun to do. And I think it always comes back to when I say to them, look, there are, when I was SVP of marketing for Famous Footwear, when I work with CMOs or if I work with CEOs, we have 4 things that we're responsible for that tie to sales, and only 4. I don't care what business you are. Acquiring new customers, getting those customers to retain them. So if you have 70 customers and they each spend $1 a year and you can get that to 80% because the industry's at 90, so there's a good chance you can do it, that's a worthwhile thing to spend on because you're already increasing your sales $10. It's a behavior that ties to sales. Acquiring new customers, retaining those, getting existing customers to purchase more. Across your product line, more visits, more times that they purchase, all those different things that are specific to each business, and then acquiring lapsed. And you have to think of this in terms of your own business, but also who you're approaching. If you're approaching me and I'm sitting as SVP of marketing, one, I'm really, really busy, and I'm not talking to a lot of people, and very, very few get through. Because if I want something, I go out and typically will search it. But if you're talking to me and you're not talking in terms of one of those 4 things, you're not talking in terms of what I need to do my job and what I'm going to be evaluated on. It is critical that you understand that, and everything else comes afterwards. And yes, there are communication objectives like awareness and shifts in attitudes. That's all very, very important. But you've got to get those 4 right. So what's the plan of action? Sort of what I call umbrella strategies. And fun area, I could go on and on this, but I think one of the fundamental, I'm just going to mention a couple. You get a flavor for this. Are you building the market? Or are you stealing share? That is a huge decision. Building the market is something innovative and new. You've got to do a lot of education preemptively for your product, but it's critical because people don't understand. Networked Insights was building a market. The people they were talking to were not used to going to the social media sites to call information. And yet, when they saw how powerful it was, and that's why it was really important to put a consultancy portion into it because they were building the market. And again, the initial stuff that we did showed that that was absolutely critical. So are you building the market or are you stealing share? Stealing share is a very, very different proposition that a lot of mainline companies do, and you're going to get more into promotion and things like that. Initial trial incentive and repeat strategy. We've talked about that. That would be Eat Street. That would be AAA. So what is it that that would be Networked Insights on that killer application. What's the initial trial, the initial trial incentive or story that we're going to go to them with, and how do we get repeat purchase? What's the lead product, and how do we penetrate? There's a lot of these different strategy areas, but again, and I look across 19 areas, but you're not going to do all 19 because again, you have an unlimited or a limited budget and limited time, and you don't have an unlimited budget. So what's your story? I love this. There's so many times that CEOs, owners of companies will come and say, Scott, we've got a really great story. I know we've got a great story. We're just not telling it well. We don't know how to tell it. So if you think about message strategy, it's a way into the positioning. Volvo is known for what? Safety. Okay. I want you to take 30 seconds and create an ad in your head. Don't worry, Volvo's not going to buy it. It won't be that good, I'm sure. But create an ad in your head how you would communicate Volvo around the value proposition of safety. Okay? And I got to tell you, 30 seconds, you could do that this good. There's a lot of agencies out there that would love to talk to you. So somebody give me their ad, if they're brave enough to. We won't laugh. Nobody will laugh. Somebody give me their ad. Yeah.
Head-on collision with a truck, person survives.
Okay, head-on collision with a truck, person survives, and why did they survive? Was it frameable? Okay, better steel, better construction. Great, that's a message strategy, a way into safety. Okay, who else has one? I should call on my wife. she's if you could see her look, she's saying, "Don't you dare." How about if you're saying, the most important job of a parent is protecting your kids. Very, very emotional. They got the kid, with Volvo, they're going to be safe. Rational, emotional, two different message strategies, two different ways in. We could go on and on and on. But that's the idea here is what's the best way into your value promise or your brand positioning. That's the message strategy. I go through 7 questions. I think the questions are easy, and I find in my business that people get lost in the semantics. So I've really boiled it down to keeping it very simple. The questions are understandable. The answers are very difficult to get to. But I want to start with really people understanding so we don't get into all those semantics that people get lost to because marketing is simply a language. So, who for? What's your point? What's the one word, the key word of the point? Why should you care? That's the emotional side. Why should I believe you? Which is the rational. And every great story has an emotional and a rational reason to believe. Got to have both of them. And then how do I feel? Which is the tone. And what do I do? Which is the behavior. I'm going to give you one sort of message strategy that's something that you might enjoy. I haven't really gone back to this for a while. But Sonic Foundry was basically would allow a teenage boy to become a rock star because there was thousands of different drum licks, guitar that you could pick from and put music together and create your own music. They were small startup. They were going to Comdex, which is the largest, at the time, the largest trade show in America, and they were up against all the other high-tech companies, and you can just go through in your head and you can name them. Who had booths the size of buildings versus Sonic Foundry, which had like a little area back here. So they were really, really fighting for attention. We were going after really big box retailers who sell this to teenage boys who know rock stars get the girl. The teenage boy inside the adult retail buyer who always wanted to be a rock star. What do? They let anyone with an interest be a rock star. And how are they different? It was really very, very simple. Anyone could do it. Their brand character was rebels and archetypes, and this group really, really, truly was bad boys, rock stars. They had product names like Spank, Vegas, Acid, which Zany Brainy said you can't get into. And so when people got off the plane, they were met by people dressed up like religious fanatics in sandals and saying, and this was before 9/11, saying, "Don't go to booth 554. Then you go a little bit further down, and you've got protesters protesting acid. Don't go to booth 554 with signs. You get down to where the suitcases were coming around. There were hundreds of guitar cases with things like Screw Muskrat Love, Acid Louder Than Vegas, Play the Toot Toot Old Man. You go outside, we had protesters protesting. The only buy was bus placards. If you go into the casinos or into the restaurants, we had people going around in the urinal cakes in the men's room. You'd look down and it would say, acid, nice penis. So it just went on and on and on. They ended up winning the Pushy Award, which was the Marketer of the Year award. Their stock skyrocketed. Some of the other people in this room remember it, but it basically went from $9 or $10 to about $120. They got into Best Buy, had just a tremendous, tremendous run. Liz and I got out of the stock after partying with those guys and recognizing that budget meant nothing, and that their budget was gone at 6 o'clock at the Sands, and we had Joe Walsh, and they just kept going and going and going, so we made a smart move there. And finally, evaluation. So, evaluation, sometimes we measure the wrong things. It's easy to measure behavior, total sales, share of market, share of wallet, but it's the emotional side that's sometimes very, very difficult. Satisfaction scores, esteem, the relevance that the brand holds. It's an important part of my life. Refer a friend or another business. Those are the things that you also have to understand as you take a look at evaluating your business. So, the 8 questions. What do you need to know? What is it that you do? Who are you for? How are you different? What needs to be done? What's the plan of action? Hey, what's your story? And did we win? I'm going to end with another little test. And I think somebody here might get this. If you were first graders or second graders, and I've gone to the boys' classes, and I put this on the chalkboard, immediately, almost immediately, they'll all start raising, a half, Mr. Cooper, Mr. Cooper. They get it, and, they're squirmy and everything like that. I'm going to ask you to stay inside the boundaries here. I'd like you to connect A to A, I'd like you to connect B to B, and I'd like you to connect C to C without any of the lines intersecting. This is what I believe founders need to do. So stay inside. You can't run along. You have to stay inside. I want you to connect A to A, B to B, and C to C without any of the lines intersecting.
Can you cross over the boxes?
You have to go from one box directly to the next. So no, you can't jettison through the boxes. Come on, you didn't disappoint me with the whole flower thing. Now, and I'm seriously, I'm not kidding. If this was first graders and second graders, they'd be jumping up and down. They've got it. You got it? Okay.
Slot B and C.
Oh, that's innovative. That's innovative, but you can't. You basically go like this. So I think your job is to create that box. And you create it with answering those 8 questions. And this is where you play. And then the fun really begins. Because now we get to the tactics. And as long as you're in that box, you can be very, 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 very creative. I was going to award one of the books to somebody that got that, but I'll have to talk to John, and we'll get a couple to you, and he can get them out to you. I was sure that somebody from this group would. So this is it. This is the thing that I think is your business as founders. It's what you should be managing. And I thank you a ton. I'll take any questions you've got, but I wish you all the best in your creating. So thanks. Ben.
Yeah, actually, I was curious. You said something that was very interesting earlier on, was that the service.
Pushing
you're
service
selling,
and
yeah, service and products together. So I didn't quite. If you're a service company,
well,
how do you get products on?
The example would be like the accounting firm.
Yeah.
They actually create software that you can take and plug into your business.
But I argue that that's still a service to a certain extent, right? So
Well-
like, if you're a B2B business,
Yep.
that's kind of in the middle of which we do a lot of, right? Like
Yep.
platforms that
Yep.
enable B2B.
Yep.
So how would you?
Well, give me. Let's play the game here and see if it works. Give me an example of a B2B
So
company.
say,
And we'll use the whole group as like a big board of director and see if we can't.
Right. Those guys are here today. Connect with a company where it's like marketplace allowing, small businesses to buy from their existing suppliers, which is a platform.
And so what are they buying? They
Like all kinds of stuff, like
Non-essential goods and services.
if you're a restaurant, you buy,
Yep.
Refrigerators.
Yep.
To,
So what I would go back to, and the sort of the way I would approach this is say, really go through this question: what business are they really in? And if you answered that in the context of like what we did, you can always get to, adding products that would augment what business they're in.
Right, like even like, for example, so these platforms where, like StubHub, so everybody knows about that, where buyers and sellers come together,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah,
either
marketplaces.
where either C2C or B2B or
Yeah.
B2C, how would you?
Yeah, I mean, marketplaces that might be actual, actual content in terms of, books and brochures and things like that they can buy that makes them smarter on how to do it. So again, you can always combine.
In that case, what they realized is they were missing at the moment sales, so they actually ended up putting physical stuff
Okay.
on kiosks.
Okay,
at the
right,
stadium, and they didn't have it for
Right.
a few years.
right.
And that really drove a lot of, hot ticket.
Did everybody hear what Andy just said, talking about stuff about putting kiosks because they were missing sales at the point of purchase or at the point of sale?
High margin, high velocity.
Yep.
Impulsive, passionate sales.
You can always get there if you go back to what is it that they're really doing, not the products. Oh, go ahead, Scott.
I think a good one really has been like H&R
And speak
Block.
up, so just be, yeah.
So I think a good one has been like H&R Block, which, traditionally is, we do your taxes.
Yep.
Okay? Now, we do your taxes, okay, and we will go through them, your prior ones, and our objective
And
is
take a look
to give you- it's almost like it's a
Give you a report.
personal care
Yep,
with doing your taxes.
yep. Yeah, you can always, so a couple of good examples, you can always get there, and it's worth doing. It's really how you create, I think, value. The great companies spend a lot of time thinking about that. Other questions out there? Any? Okay.
So you brought up the Chrysler, which
Yeah.
I think is kind of interesting.
Yep.
Versus the Honda.
Yeah.
Yeah, to me, there was at one point one of the most brightest individuals out there, Lee Iacocca, okay, in terms of trying to resurrect it. And his statement was, if you can find better, buy it. Okay? So how do you think in terms of like Chrysler versus like a GM, which basically came back from the dead,
Yeah.
literally?
Well, big question. I think Lee Iacocca was a personality, and I think that was an ad campaign. And I think they last, and they have a huge place, and I've been involved with it my whole life. But I don't think it substitutes for a core competency. And I think really companies have to have them. What's interesting about GM is that they have the model of if I'm going to sort of, I don't know. So that's the real answer about GM. I do know from the brand positioning, they've gone from the model of you don't buy GM, you buy a Buick, you buy an Oldsmobile, so that the brand is important. And it's really on personalities or targets or attitudes. I'm a Chevy purchaser, and that's very different than a Cadillac. Ford, and that's one of these strategic decisions, Ford sells the corporate brand. Ford, quality is job one, and I get a Ford Taurus. So I think both those companies have done a good job of that brand positioning. I would argue that they haven't, I don't understand, and again, I haven't worked with them, so maybe I just don't get it, But I don't think they've really gone back and thought about the core competency. I know Honda has. I've worked with them, so I know them. They talk about it all the time.
Well, you're probably right, because if they think that John Barbados is going to save their
Yeah.
sales by
Yeah.
having the John Barbados limited edition car,
Yeah,
they're in trouble.
and I love the Detroit advertising. It's awesome,
Can you talk
But-
about Budweiser?
Yeah, what's Bud do? What's Bud do? People will say, you know, they'll think, sell water, right, right. I can tell you because I've worked a lot with Coors. And Bud is in the distribution business. They're extremely powerful with sole distributors versus all these other people that are fighting for shared distributors. So Scott Cooper's distributorship, I'm a Budweiser distributor, and I've spent all my time getting product placed. Now all of a sudden, Scott Cooper, and I'm not a Bud distributor, but I'll sell a little Coors, a little something else, and you're fighting for that distributor's time because when they go in and sell, there's only so much space available. So Budweiser is a phenomenal distribution company.
Which led them to water.
Well, that's
That's what
Yeah.
happens in distribution.
yeah,
of beer.
yeah. So, all right, hey, thanks very much. I appreciate it. It's been great.